the tarot card equivalent to the transformational emergence onto the material plane of the male and female divine twin souls is the Lover's card, which is card number 6. However, when we look to the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean spiral, we can see it is a number 8 in the sequence. If we add all the previous numbers in the Fibonacci sequence up until this number, we get 20. And if we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, we can see that 8 and 20 are situated at the heart chakra. Although there is an obvious connection to the name of this card, the Lovers and the Heart, if we look to the Kabbalah tree of life, the Sephirah connected to the heart chakra is Tifereth, which is number 6. So this confirms again that the number 6 and the Lover's card are connected to the heart, and the numbers of the heart chakra are 8 and 20. And if we look at the pathways from 4 Chesed, the Empress, through the heart, Tifereth, to number 8, Hod, we see that the path of the hand, which symbolizes action, is 20. And the path of the eye, which is vision, is 26, which equates to 8. The number 6 is symbolic of the divine twin souls in their physical form. And the number 8 is referring to their immortal soul. And this immortality is directly connected to the weight of the heart. The divine is also connected to them at the heart. And we see this represented by the angel that stands between them. And this is once again showing a third conscious force between God consciousness and the divine twin souls. The number 20 represents our connection from our heart to the Sun and the divine. And we see a connection to the number 20 and both the Sun and the divine in this verse from Exodus 28. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Sabbath is a Sunday and a day of rest because it was supposed to be a day we remembered our connection to the Sun and the divine through our hearts. Once again, it seems the religious establishment sought to implement themselves into this role also, and thus making it a day of singing songs of praise to some overweight priest who was happy to take your money as he passed around his plate. It is also interesting to note that when God speaks his commandments, he starts at Exodus verse 21. And God spake all these words, saying. This verse is showing us that God speaks through the heart. And the heart of a fetus also beats for the first time on the 20th day of gestation. The angel stands in front of the sun in full illumination, not only showing a connection to the divine with the purple robes, but also that the divine is very much present and supporting them in every way when they are first manifest at the beginning of the cycle. And this is represented in the verse in Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. When you add the verse 1 and 5 together, you get 6, as well as representing the twin souls in the number 2. At this time, they are in harmony and full consciousness and have the gift of expression and knowledge shown by the symbols of the serpent and the apples on this card. For we see that the divine female twin soul is in front of the tree and has access to this knowledge, and the expression of this knowledge is symbolized by the snake. Because we see the snake referenced to speech and expression in both the Kabbalah tree of life and scripture. On the tree of life, the throat chakra is located at the path of the serpent, and in scripture, the serpent speaks to them about eating the divine fruit of knowledge in Genesis 3:5. For God doth know in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. 3 and 5 equals 8, the immortal soul. And the number 8 is also connected to the heart chakra. So now we understand that the serpent and tree of apples are symbolic for the expressed intellect of the female twin soul. However, the divine male twin soul has his divine knowledge represented by the tree with the 12 flames. The fires are representing his divinity illuminated within him, as they are at the height of consciousness and have full access to their divinity. However, in the background, we can see a steep mountain has been depicted. This is to denote that this will not be a continuous cycle of never-ending planes, but one of changes. The mountain is represented in a phallic way, as it is the male that will forget his divinity first and force Lilith from the garden as they once again descend in consciousness throughout this cycle. When consciousness leaves them and they forget their divinity, they are no longer welcome in the garden. And we see this in Genesis 3:24. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. 2 and 4 equals 6, and 3 is the Trinity. The cherubim guarding the way of the tree of life is symbolic for man descending into lower consciousness, and our worthiness of divine knowledge leaves us and we are denied of it. As we saw previously on the Kabbalah Tree of Life, the number 6 Lover's card equates to the Sephirah number 6, called Tifereth. This Sephirah is connected to the heart chakra, and in the Hindu tradition, this is known as the Anahata chakra. Its symbol is often shown as a green lotus with 12 flower petals. And in the middle of the lotus is a hexagram, which also represents the number 6. This hexagram is symbolic for the upper ethereal forces and the lower energetic forces of the earthly plane merging within the heart. As discussed in previous videos, the energy point of the heart is the only energy center in our ethereal body that is anchored in both the physical and ethereal planes. This is where our lower 3 chakras and higher 3 chakras meet, and it is not surprising that the name of this chakra is equated to a sound known as the Anahata Nada, the unmade sound. This is a sound not made in the realms of where we dwell. It is the unknown sound of the universe, the primal sound of energy itself. Our ethereal heart is the merging point or vortex of the higher and lower realms. The Hindu called this hexagram within this chakra a Shatkona. It is a symbol used in Hindu yantra that represents the union of Purusha, the supreme being, symbolic of the ethereal and divine forces, and Prakriti, which is symbolic of Mother Nature and the causal matter influenced by the ethereal and upper realms. In Tibetan Buddhism, the heart wheel is circular, white, and has 8 petals or channels that reach downwards. It is said these channels divide into 3, the mind wheel, speech wheel, and body wheel. They then go to the 24 places in the body. They then divide into 3 again, and then into 1,000, producing 72,000 channels known as the nadi, which spread out throughout the whole body. It is interesting in these numbers from Tibetan Buddhism that we see a connection to the number 8. The channels from the heart are said to go into 24 places. 2 and 4 are 6. And if we divided 24 by the Trinity, we get 8. So we are seeing a connection to the number 6 and 8 once again. Therefore, it is not surprising that on the Kabbalah Tree of Life, that the middle Sephirah, Tifereth, also represents the center where the upper and lower forces meet. Kabbalists say that Tifereth is somewhat of a converting sephira between form, Yesod, and the ethereal forces of Kether. Tifereth is also related to the sun and the astrological sign of Leo, and in Christian Kabbalah, Tifereth is especially associated with Jesus, who they call God the Son, as opposed to Kether, who is referred to as God the Father. They say this is because in Tifereth, the divine force sacrifices itself, transmuting into the forces of energy and matter, in order that creation might come to be. They also say that it is this sephira where God becomes a mortal man. So what these Kabbalists are clearly showing is how they are relating these energies that are manifesting our creation from the projected mental universe, God consciousness, through the sun onto the material plane. And as Hermetics shows us, with the correspondence of the mental, spiritual, and physical planes, there are no clearly defined boundaries, and all the planes merge into one another. The heart is where your ethereal and foundational forces merge, and you are anchored onto this plane. And the sun is the energetic connection that anchors the soul here by the heart, projected through God's mind. However, as the tree of life and Eastern philosophies show, you must pass into the ethereal heart and relinquish your bondage to the physical plane to move up into the ethereal and more conscious energy points within you. There is a Norse goddess known as Sin, and she was known as the one who guarded the gates and refused entry to those who were not deemed worthy. In chapter 35 of the Prose Edda book, Sin is listed as 11th of 16 Aesir. It is said that she guards the doors of the hall and shuts them against those who are not to enter. Her name is also connected to a saying where a denial, sin, is made when one says no. So we can see in the Norse mythology, it is the goddess Sin who guards the doors to the halls or path of Gimel. For it is when we work against the heart, we are creating sin or weight in our heart. And if we add the numbers of the chapter together, 3 and 5, it equals 8. In Sufism, the Qalb is called the heart of a mystic, which is caught between the downward pull of the lower nafs and the upward pull of the spirit of Allah, and thus can be blackened by sin. So once again, we see the heart connected to the area of upper and lower forces. The entire cornerstone of the ancient Egyptian belief system was related to the heart, and everything was focused on preparing for a time when the divine light would return and their hearts would be weighed against this light. The weighing of the heart ceremony was not a ritual enacted because their biological container had expired. They knew the truth of their divinity and their true ethereal forms, and as such prepared their souls and their heart for this coming light, not their physical bodies or their physical heart, which were only symbolic. The physical heart, like the pineal gland, are physical extensions of energy points within our ethereal bodies. Our ethereal body is who we are first and foremost. It is the form in which we were first created, and as such, it is with the ethereal body that we feel changes in vibrations or resonance first. These changes are then relayed to certain physical parts of our body that relate to these energy points. So for example, when sun gazing, you may feel a sensation behind your forehead, and your first thought is that it must be your pineal gland. However, what you are experiencing is your pineal gland reacting to a resonance from your third eye chakra, which is then being felt in the physical extension of that energy point. The correct way to perceive yourself is as an ethereal being, for this is who you are, and this is what the establishment have tried to hide from the masses, to keep them locked down into a physical perception of themselves. The establishment have even gone as far to create departments to program the reality of the masses into one of physicality, using agencies like science, which they then disguise as education, when in fact it is merely programming. Most people wouldn't know that the Big Bang Theory was postulated by a Catholic priest, and which establishment has so much to lose if humanity woke up to the fact they are ethereal and immortal, and they are only responsible to their own souls and God for their immortality. Do you think we would need crime control and government to live as decent beings upon this planet if that truth were known? I think not. So what this information is showing us is the truth of who we are, and that is ethereal beings with a physical extension. And we need not fear death of our physical extension, but instead pay attention to the cycle of death and resurrection of our souls. If we look to the Aramaic Bible in verse Matthew 10:28, "And you shall not be afraid of those who kill the body, that are not able to kill the soul. Rather be afraid of him who can destroy soul and body in Gehenna." In other translations, the religious institutions have equated Gehenna to hell. However, what this is speaking of is the soul being wiped from existence, as the ancient Egyptians believed happened if you were not carrying the weight of enough light within your heart. The love we have collected throughout our lifetimes is an energy that can be measured by the Creator. And when this divine light returns, we will be measured against the light of the Creator to see if we are worthy of our immortality. And we see this verse is number 10:28, which is reduced to 10:10, showing the infinite cycle of the twin souls. In this verse from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they speak of the heart and truth leading them back to heaven and their godlike divinity. It states, "May the hearts of gods lead him in his exalted state into heaven among the gods who appear in visible forms. If any god or any goddess attack Osiris Ani, whose word is truth, when he setteth out, the ancestor of the year who liveth upon hearts, Osiris, shall eat him when cometh forth from Abydos, and the ancestors of Ra shall reckon with him, and the ancestors of light shall reckon with him." This is showing that those who live and speak in truth will once again experience a time when they walk as gods on this earth, and that those who do live in truth are protected and guided by the gods. However, although our paths are destined, we have free will to take a higher or lower path, and see if we meet our tests through strength of character and heart, or whether we give in to the temptation of the lower path and remain in bondage to the physical plane. We see this lower path symbolized in the other card connected to the number 6 Lovers card, and that is the Devil card, which is card number 15. The Devil card is symbolic of our bondage to the physical plane, when we descend into lower consciousness. When we forget our divinity, we forget that we are ethereal, and instead only think of ourselves as finite and physical. This is why we see the chains around the necks of the divine twin souls, for they are trapped in the physical perception of themselves and a victim of the devil. In Daniel 5:20, it shows the heart is connected to his covenant in this verse, but it could not override his mind in lower consciousness. It states, "But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him." Showing that when the mind refused the heart, his divinity remained elusive to him. And we see that the number 5 is symbolic of the covenant, and 20 shows the connection to the divine, which measures his worthiness through his heart. We also see a connection to the heart and the sun with the ancient Maya, who willingly sacrificed their hearts to the sun. Once again, some people seem to be offended by this practice and look down on the Maya due to these rituals. But what they don't understand is that the Maya knew they were ethereal and that their soul would return again, so they did not fear death. These rituals were performed because they believed a time of higher consciousness could be brought back through the sacrificing of the heart. We also see in some other cultures that pain and sacrifice are often a way to strengthen the heart of a warrior. When a person deals honourably with pain and sacrifice, this increases the light within their heart. In some Native American tribes, there was a ceremony known as the sun dance, and this was a ceremony only the bravest and most honourable warrior could partake in. This warrior was then hung on hooks to take the pain of the people in his village. They believed in doing this, he not only lightened his own heart, but their hearts too. And in Greek mythology, there is a story about a centaur named Chiron, and this story is also describing the strength of heart that comes through pain. Chiron embodies the compassion and humility pain can bring to a person, but in turn strengthens their heart also. This is why it takes strength of heart to return to the higher consciousness of an immortal soul. And we can see this depicted on the strength card, which is card number 8, symbolic for immortality, where the woman has closed the lion's jaws with strength of heart and not violence. We can also see this relayed in the story of Daniel and the lions. Daniel 6:16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said, Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Daniel 6:20. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice to Daniel. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom you serve continually, able to deliver you from the lions? Daniel 6:21. Then said Daniel to the king, O king, live forever. Daniel 6:22. My God has sent his angel and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocence was found in me, and also before you, O king, I have done no hurt. Daniel 6:23. Then the king, exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found on him, because he believed in his God. The verses here in Daniel 6 are showing that when Daniel believes in his divinity and is no longer trapped in the illusion of bondage to the physical body, in his darkest hour he is rewarded with the truth of his divinity and immortality. This is relayed to him by his angel, which is symbolic for his ethereal self. Therefore, the lions, knowing Daniel's understanding of his immortality, see no reason to kill him. This is what the strength card number 8 is once again symbolic for. And on the tree of life, the Sephirah Hod number 8 is directly connected to the strength card, and is said to be symbolic of, instead of conquering an obstacle in one's path, to rather overcome it by subduing oneself to the obstacle. And we see that the Sephiroth of the heart is connected to the Sephiroth of strength through the path of vision. This is symbolic in the way one perceives themselves. The story of Daniel shows that his trust in himself, of who he really was actually his trust in God, and he was rewarded as such for his courage with immortality. And finally, in Proverbs 10:20, we see that the heart weighted in sin is of little value compared to the soul that lives in truth. The tongue of the just is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is little worth. Once again, 20 is connected to the heart, and 10 is symbolizing the covenant of the divine twin souls and the infinite cycle of the souls. So now we have an understanding for the divine twin souls in their physical form on the material plane through the Lover's card. So let us now look to the next card that is symbolic of our ethereal form and the ethereal realm, which is card number 7, the Chariot. When the spirit of man is unawakened, he cannot know the great self within him, of which he is a part. Not knowing his true nature and unable to see clearly, he is blinded by material delusions. Would not the creatures of the night, which never see the sun, deem the moon to be the most brilliant light in the sky above? So it is with man walking in the darkness of spiritual unconsciousness. He says, I am body, and the body is my whole being. And in the delusion of that belief, he becomes ensnared in an existence bound to matter. Like the creatures bound to an existence in the night, which cannot know the glories of things flourishing in the brilliance of daylight, so it is with men bound to the darkness of spiritual ignorance. The above verse from the Colburn is explaining the spiritual ignorance of man who does not understand he is more than just his physical container, and that this flawed perception actually creates his reality, and he is trapped in bondage to the illusion of the material plane. The verse is also perfectly representing the next tarot card, number 7, the Chariot, and is symbolic of the ethereal form of the male and female twin souls and the ethereal plane. As we have discussed previously, our souls move between the material and ethereal plane during our incarnations on this realm. This ethereal plane is also relayed in the Greek mythology of Hades. Hades was not only a place where one could face a time of torment as a soul while awaiting their physical incarnation, but the mythology also tells there were levels within Hades where the good souls spend their time in a beautiful garden awaiting to be incarnated again. On the ethereal plane, we are closer to the divine, and as such, we have a full understanding of ourselves. However, we do not have the benefit of this understanding when we incarnate physically onto the material plane. So let us look further into the Chariot card and see what we can unlock within its symbolism to help us better understand the true extent of our potential and who we really are. The Chariot card is card number 7. The number 7 is relating to the 7 energy points or primary chakras within our ethereal form. It is also relating to the 7 gates, which are symbolic of the ascent from the root chakra, our first gate, back to reunite with God consciousness at the 7th gate, which equates to the crown chakra. If we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, we will see that the number 7 is also connected with the root chakra. This is again symbolic of the ascent of the soul back to God consciousness, which begins at the root chakra, the first gate. These 7 gates back to the divine can also be related to the Sumerian mythology of the goddess Inanna, who was symbolic for the divine female twin soul and her journey of sacrifice as she passes through each of the 7 gates of the underworld. The underworld being symbolic for the material plane, and each gate is depicting our ascent back to reunite with divine source. We see this theme repeated in Jacob's ladder, where there are 7 rungs on the ladder back to heaven. And according to the Jewish teachings, before the coming of the Messiah, the first angel, representing the 70th year exile of Babylonia, climbed up 70 rungs and then fell down. So again we see there is a connection to the path back to God and the number 7. This path back to God consciousness through these gates or levels is relayed in the verse Matthew 7:14. Because strait is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. The number 7 is relating this to our ethereal self. And 1 and 4 equals 5, which is symbolic of our covenant with God. So let us see where the Chariot card falls on the Fibonacci sequence. And we see it is on the number 13 in the sequence. And number 13 is also positioned at the top of the ancient Egyptian number key, connected to the third eye and crown chakra. 13 is also connected to the number 13 death card. However, this is not something to be feared, as it is representing the death of our physical container. For we must understand that we are ethereal beings in our truest form, for that is how we were first created from God consciousness. Therefore, symbolically, when we are incarnated on the material plane within our physical bodies, we are in death, unlike our ethereal self, which is immortal. We also see another connection to the physical within the number 13. For when we add 1 and 3, this equates to 4. And as we saw with the Emperor card, 4 represents foundation and the earth. So this is what the death card is symbolic for, the death of our physical containers on the material plane. However, the establishment have used the fear of death as a tool to control the masses. And they have ensured that the herd were not only programmed to fear physical death, but to also fear the number 13 and view it as evil, when in fact it is symbolic of the resurrection of our soul and life. When we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, the number 13 is related to the third eye and crown chakra. We can even view these two chakras as working together, as these energy points represent where our soul consciousness meets God consciousness. The crown chakra actually begins at the ajna third eye chakra, which is connected to us physically at the pineal gland, and then permeates out into pure consciousness to sit above the head as a crown. This is why the crown chakra is sometimes shown at the third eye pineal gland area, as this is the point where our soul and our consciousness reunites with God. It is the gate through which we leave our physical containers, and it is actually referred to as the gateway in the Hindu tradition. On the Kabbalah tree of life, the third eye pineal gland is relating to Daleth, also called door, once again showing that it is at this point we reunite with divine source. We can also see this spoken of in scripture as meeting God face to face or eye to eye. And in this verse, it is symbolic of the third eye pineal gland opening to see God face to face. But this is done through the heart first. Psalm 27:8. When thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. 2 and 7 equal 9. And is symbolic of the divine Trinity, the divine twin souls and God meeting face to face. And the number 8 is symbolic of the immortal soul and God's source, and is also connected to the heart on the ancient Egyptian number key. In the Hindu tradition, the crown chakra is called the Sahasrara and is the 7th primary chakra. So again, we have a connection to the number 7 chariot card and the crown chakra. The crown chakra is considered to be the chakra of pure God consciousness, and it is symbolized by a lotus with 1,000 multicolored petals. It is located either at the crown of the head or above the head. This chakra contains the white drop or bodhicitta, a Sanskrit word meaning that which is conscious. In the ancient Hindu teachings, the crown chakra is represented by the color white and is connected to inner wisdom and the death of the body. In Tibetan Buddhism, the point at the crown of the head is represented by a white circle with 33 downward pointing petals. It is of primary importance in the performance of phawa, which means the projection of consciousness after death or a transference of consciousness at the time of death, in order to obtain a rebirth in a pure land. So again, in both these different cultural teachings, we see that the death of the physical body is connected with this chakra, which is symbolically what the 13 Death Tarot card is also showing us. The pure land they are referring to is symbolic for a time on this realm at the beginning of the cycle, when all including Mother Earth are at the height of an illumination of divine consciousness. The ancient Egyptians called this Aru, the field of reeds. And this is the place all souls aspired to rebirth into, a new cycle of incarnations beginning with the Golden Age. The reuniting with God consciousness at this point is also depicted in the symbolism of the third eye chakra, where we see the sun and the moon shown on either side of the triangle. The triangle points downwards, representing ethereal and divine forces being brought down onto the physical plane. The sun is symbolic of the male twin soul, and the moon is representing the female twin soul. It is at this point the Trinity are reunited, and this is symbolically represented by the triangle over the large white circle in the middle. The seed syllable for this chakra is the syllable Om, and the presiding deity is Arahanteshvara, who is half male and half female, representing Shiva and Shakti. As we now understand from previous videos, Shiva and Shakti are symbolic of the divine male and female twin souls in their ethereal forms. In the ancient Hindu texts, it says in the repetitive cycle of the eons, Arahanteshvara is ordained to reappear at the beginning of every creation as in the past. And Utpala, a 10th century Indian mystic, called this form the Lord whose half is the fair one. So we can see the divine twin souls and unification with God consciousness are being symbolically shown connected at this point. In Qigong, a form of martial arts, the highest dantian is located at this position. This is known as one of the 3 furnaces that converts energy in the body. In this dantian, the spiritual Shen energy is converted into Wujji, the infinite space of void. This void, Wujji, is referring to the space in the vortex that connects our consciousness with the divine consciousness. And this is why we see that the heart and third eye pineal gland are connected. For as shown in the previous videos, the heart is the other vortex that also connects us to God. Finally, we see this connection to God consciousness, Orion, and the number 13, also shown in an unusual artifact found in Ecuador in the 1980s. The artifact was made of a very ancient black stone, and etched upon it were 13 levels of bricks leading up to an eye. When the artifact was put under a UVA light, these etchings illuminated. Even more interesting, on the bottom of the pyramid, there were also symbols etched into it, as well as gold inlays representing Orion's belt. This conclusion of the inlays equating to Orion's belt is also shared by the well-respected researcher Klaus Donner. When the symbols on the bottom were translated by a German linguist, Kurt Schildmann, he said they were a very early pre-Sanskrit language, and what they translated to was the Son of the Creator comes. So now we have a clear representation in the artifact of the illumination of Orion and the divine twin souls represented by the sun, which also equates to Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And this illumination of the divine souls is an illumination of that part of the divine within us all.
And in this alternative movement, as you rightly say, it has become a focus for me. It was there from the beginning, but as time went by, it became even more and more important because too many people were leaving this side. And that you need to take up the tools to help you to strip this debris, to mend this dilapidation. It's like, and basically inoculate your psyche, inoculate yourself so that you're immune. Now, of course, there's not only one way to do it. I'm not saying that tarot is the only way to do it. I mean, you yourself are into martial arts. That's a form of meditation. That's a form of hygiene. That's a hygienic thing. Yeah. For others, it might be getting into nature or taking up a particular sport, but doing it in a mystical way. So I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but I'm saying it is a very ancient and powerful way to do it.